How's it going, everyone? Let's continue where we left off, and we can further refine this metal that we made. And there's actually a few more parts that are going to be included with this sort of metal. We have the side piece here. We might even have a couple of the gears on the side, and I think some of these parts on the back might be showing this metal as well. And then from there, what I'd like to do is sort of tackle some of these bolts here. I'm kind of guessing that all the bolts are going to be having the same material on them, and since we don't have a ID mask on this set, what we could do is set up that material and just kind of as we're going through each piece, just sort of apply it as we go. But first things first, let's sort of further refine this metal here. There isn't like a ton I want to do to it, but I kind of like this part here where there's a bit more contrast, and I kind of want to push that further in more areas. So I'm going to go into this bump variation, and let's pull out our favorite brush here, the mold brush, and turn this guy pretty low, and just sort of fade this out a little bit more. We'll give this a second to load. I feel like, I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit, I think. So hopefully we can finish off this tutorial series before anything like that happens, but either way, we should be good for this part at least. So I'm going to clear that up a little bit. And one of the things we didn't touch too much was the occlusion dirt. I think it added like a bit of a gray value over everything. So if we add a paint layer to this guy and turn it down, yeah, we can scrub out some of this stuff and get a much shinier area. I think that contrast in the grunge looks really nice. Kind of pull that out a little bit more. And that's something I'm trying to emulate a little bit more. We can then make this look a little less procedural. Clean up the bottom a bit. And then rather than that kind of speckly dust, we can replace it with a little bit of rust. To get some more color in there. And that's a little too obvious. Something like that's kind of nice. Here as well, like some of the parts of the reference have it being very noisy like this, but I think this might just be a little too noisy. So I'm going to tone that back. I think this is some dirt up here. And then I think rust is kind of like the good blending material for this. Kind of liking these dots here, but it might just be a little too much. Tone it down a bit. Unless that's something different, kind of seems like it is. It's part of the rust. Can tone that down. Okay. Just really reeling it in a little bit more. Fade that a little bit more. And yeah, same with the rust spots. I might tone it down a little bit there. The inside here is looking a little crazy, but I think it's pretty natural for it to be like that. I might just tone it down a bit. As far as the dust goes, we could probably afford to pull that back a bit. I'm also getting a lot of rust in here. I think that might be rust occlusion. Yeah. Going to add a paint layer to this guy. Turn it down a bit. Kind of bring some of it back. But yeah, really liking that shine contrast. Let's see if we can continue it maybe on the top a little bit here by erasing some more of the bump. A lot of the dirt can go. We're just going to bring back some brightness there. And the rust as well. Just really getting some contrast between those parts, which is nice. We'll do a little bit here as well. Getting rid of some of that dirt. So we're getting kind of like a more buffed shine area, and then I might want to make it a little bit rougher, so I'll put some rust on that. But it's just a nice variation. Pull back rust here, it's a big open spot. Pull back some dirt, and once again, just a nice sort of patch right on there. Can do something similar here. It's the dirt that seems to be a little over the top in some of these areas. Then just gonna blend that back in. These spots could probably use a little bit more love. Probably rust this up a little bit more. The dirt though is quite a bit, so I'm going to pull that back. We're getting some kind of rust here. I feel like this might be rust occlusion, rust spots. Not sure what's causing that black. Might be a bake error. And sort of clean up some of this so it's not too uniform either. Just getting rid of some of these spots. Some of the dirt. Some of the rust. I just don't want things to be super uniform in how they're kind of covered in grime. Not bad. Let's give this guy another treatment. Just kind of similar to what we did on the other side. I'm just going to pull back a lot of these bumps in the middle, and the dirt as well, so we get some more shine on it. Do the same thing here. Got a lot of rust spots in this area. Can get rid of some of those. Not all of them. I overall like what they're doing, but just a bit much. So we're getting a nice shiny area here. It's kind of what I'm going for, that kind of darkness in some areas. Can sort of pull that a bit more over here as well. Seems like some of that rust got a little out of control. I like it piling up in some areas, but just don't want it to be too much. This seems to be rust occlusion. Or is this is just rust? Interesting. Is this rust occlusion? No, this is also just rust. Okay, let's pull that back. And then let's sort of push this spot here on the side a little bit more. And we're also getting a lot more color variation when we're doing this, right? Because we have some greens, we have some warms, and the background is kind of like a cool silvery color. So this is really good for kind of getting a mix and match of all of that stuff. So this patch seems a little big, so I'm just gonna brush a little in. But yeah, as far as those big pieces go, I'm pretty happy with them overall. If I find the reference that I was kind of going off of for this, it's not half bad. I kind of like this, how some areas are very, very targeted with it. So I'm going to go ahead and mimic that with the rust here. Really get it on the end, then even maybe rust occlusion because it's a bit stronger. Just trying to keep an eye on reference and see where I can push it in a bit further. The rust spots here is a bit much. We could probably kill off some of that. These thinner pieces still have quite a bit of shine to them, so I might sort of readjust how I'm distributing this sort of speckliness, just keeping them around these bolts and the top. As far as the dirt goes, we can sort of pile it up in those same areas. Try and blend it out as best as we can. And then push it even further with some of the rust. Make sure we're doing the same on both sides. The inside I think would naturally be a little bit more dirty because it's kind of harder to reach a lot of the grime in here, but I still think we should keep it mostly in line with how the other side is. So I'll just pull that in. Same with the dirt. And the rust. Just kind of stack it in kind of patches, and then down here we can kind of take it a bit further, because this area is just really never going to be touched by somebody, right? So if rust were to accumulate, it'd be really hard to clean. And then I'm also seeing in here we might want to pull some areas back. The dirt especially is a little out of control. Like, I don't mind it being in some of the corners, but to have it just like kind of essentially caking everything like one big occlusion mask is a little much, in my opinion. Okay. Seems a little bit more natural now. Might just want to adjust this a little bit. Once again, I think the bumps are a little much, so I'm just gonna tone that all down. This little handle part as well. And then the spots. So, not too bad. And then let's just do another quick cleanup on some of these bars, and then I think we can start adding some more pieces that sort of fall under this category. Actually, just before we forget, let's tackle this guy. Once again, I sort of want an area where it's a bit shinier. just for some additional contrast. So really just clearing up this front main plate. And then doing what I can to kind of blend this a little bit better. I feel like this might just be a little too much. Okay, let's get to these poles. Now what I want to mostly do with these is actually increase the rust. I'm seeing the reference quite a bit more going on kind of near the ends with these guys. And then maybe just add a little tone to this here. So just some more variation and variety all over. Okay, mimic it on the other side. Some rust spots here, but I think that's okay. But I'm really liking how there's more variation here now. And I might just want some slightly warmer tones in the middle, just to kind of balance it all out. This just seems a little patchy there. Fix that up. Okay, let's move down. For the most part, I'm okay with how this stuff turned out. I just think since it's near the bottom, you can probably rust up some of these areas a little bit more. Like if we're going to be rusting up the top so much, at the bottom where it's closer to other surfaces and moisture and that kind of stuff, it makes sense to also crank it up. Still just trying to do what we can to ground this guy in logic, right? And then more of a kind of dusting across everything. Same treatment on the bottom. Okay, it's looking a little bit more healthy in my opinion. And then this one, really not too much I want to change. I think it's already doing a good job, other than maybe adding a little bit more rust here. But it's pretty minor, all things considered. Okay. Can move back a little bit. These guys, I don't really want to change too much on them. Maybe just, yeah, a little bit more rusty here. This looks a little uniformly dirty, so we can probably pull back a lot of this. And kind of have our bright patch here. It's going to be another one of these sort of shiny areas. Yep, it's acting as that pretty good. This guy we might want to have a bit cleaner on the sides. Kind of let that climb a little bit higher. Just going through and erasing what we can. Not completely. I'm still going to want to blend a bit. But overall happy with that. Let's go back here, do our sort of rust pass. This area might be a little dusty for my liking. Can add some rust on the edge here. But tone it back in other areas. And then as far as back here goes, I don't think there's too much I really do need to change. Except for maybe this guy. Since we didn't have anything affecting the dust, this guy sort of filled in. So I'm really just toning it down, because there is like some AO on this part, right? These grooves collected dust a little bit. I think it's just a little bit too much in general. I want people to be able to notice the sort of details we added in there, right? So kind of stripping back pretty much everything here, including rust spots. Just really don't want it getting too noisy, right? And then it can like continue back up at the ends, where it's a little bit more boring, and we want something to kind of break it up. So I think that's a little bit better, and of course the ends are gonna need more. But as for the rest of these guys, I think they're doing a pretty fine job. I'm okay with there being a bit more rust in here. Yep. So let's go ahead and save, and then we'll dive into some new parts, and then we'll film the screws after that as well. Okay, good to go. There was one area that I noticed that we forgot about, and it is this guy. Let's give him a little bit more love before we move on. Gonna get rid of these spots. And there probably isn't too much I want to do, but just kind of like have the tip be a little bit cleaner in general. So really just getting rid of a lot of these dots. We can also clean up some of that dust. And then, of course, the rust itself can be toned back as well. Okay, that's looking quite a bit healthier. We also have down here. Let's actually just take a look at things from this view. I think the dots make a lot of sense on the bottom here, so I'm going to leave that, but let's just tone back some of this rust. This stuff is a little crazy. This, of course, is the rust occlusion, if I had to guess, as well as a lot of the dust. So I don't want to completely get rid of it, but the dust can definitely be toned back quite a bit. So I'm making sure this mask isn't on 0, because I still want it to affect it, but just really toning it back. Doing the same on this side, of course. And rust occlusion. And yeah, okay, that's more what we're going for. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some of these new pieces. So what exactly do we have to add here? It seems like these front guys sort of fall into this category. These sort of side hooks also fall into this category, and then I think we saw in a different reference this one, that this side metal piece, so all this these contraptions here, we're also going to be including in the mask. So let's go to the metal aged itself, go to our paint layer, our fill option, switch to UV, and start including some of these other pieces. It is a little bit hard to see exactly what's going on with these guys, so we'll just have to do our best there. So I'm going to include that. Let's make sure we get all these different UV shells. Comes down to here. Believe we have a face back here. Yep. This guy here. It's getting kind of hard to maneuver this camera. Okay. So there's those guys. We can just start with these for now. I'm going to have to punch out these sort of screw areas though. So changing our mask to a brush. Changing our alpha to shape. Hardening it all the way. Turning down all the jitters from the brush we were using. Turning the value down to 0. Just really want to make sure the size is just right. Okay. And then this guy as well. And then if I'm not mistaken, I think we do have some screws in here. Very, very micro detail, but you know, we're trying to keep this as accurate as possible. So let's go ahead and start working on this guy. Like everything else, I'd kind of prefer to just work up. So bump variation, we can go back to our mold brush. Really don't need it in some of these areas, plus, you know, the UVing isn't really doing any favors here. So kind of like the other side, I'll have it be more progressively leading up to the top. Down here we can clear off most of it, but the sides. Here I don't think we won't need very much. Clear off most of it. It really is not the easiest to tell without all the additional stuff, but I'm going to start minimalistic on these guys. Have more near the bottom on the inside. Okay. Occlusion dirt. Getting quite a bit, but I think they're kind of in more appropriate areas. I think I'm fine with something like this. Same here. Just don't want it to be too strong in any area. We can go to rust. This is going to be one of the most important ones. So I'm going to actually start by just you know, essentially erasing the vast majority of it like we did before, and then we'll just sort of paint it in lightly. We forgot to stamp that guy out. We can do that in just a second though. So yeah, we're in this nice kind of dirty gradients, kind of like the tip having a bit more rust as well. Okay, let's go ahead and turn this up a little bit. I'm going to start adding it back in. Very light for the moment. Have some around this area too, climbing up. Got quite a bit of work to do on the back for this part. So this is a good example. Like the UVs are stretched, and we did that as sort of a sacrifice to ensure our bake is a little bit better. In a case like this where we have so much control, it really is worth the sacrifice. Okay. Just gonna add a little in the cavity here. This guy for the most part is gonna stay pretty clean. Can work our way up another layer. The rust spots, some sort of random variation, seems fine to me. Rust occlusion. It's piling up near the bottom. And that's good for that. Honestly, I might mess with the rust a little bit more because of areas like this. But I think this is rust occlusion that's giving it these sort of funky shapes. Then I might just bring a little bit back to hug some of these areas here. Okay. This guy here is going to need a decent amount of work. But before we forget, I'm going to sort of stamp out that kind of one area. So, quickly reduce all this stuff. Grab our alpha again. Nice. Should probably turn that all the way to 0. Okay. So now we got this guy. Honestly, I think the inside looks pretty much what we want. It's just kind of the rust that's kind of gone a little haywire. So I'm actually just going to straight up use our polygon fill, turn off rust on these guys, and then just sort of do a manual paint in. And I might actually turn down the bumps as well. Seems a little aggressive in some of these areas. Have it more towards the bottom. We're also getting some kind of UV seam here, which seems to be from the rust occlusion, so I'm just going to paint that out. It's not using triplanar, that's why. I can get rust to just sort of maybe hug one of the ends here. Just some more color, right? And then as for the other side, almost never going to see this, right? So I'm just going to sort of reduce some of the bumps a little bit. And then kind of call it on that piece. There are still quite a few pieces that are using this material. Pretty sure this gear, these components here, as well as a lot of these back pieces. So I'm just going to sort of get my main reference back into view. This is also really good for it. It's kind of more of an early stage of the rusting. But yeah, kind of all these additional little metal pieces. I'm going to be giving these front pieces like a different treatment, but all these guys might as well share the same experience. I'm noticing this seems a little strange. Something's going on here. Oh, I guess that was some kind of loading error. Weird. Yeah, I'll start to include the remainder of these pieces, and we're just gonna go through them kind of one by one, just so we don't sort of forget what we have and haven't worked on. So going back to our paint layer, turning this all the way back up, can include this piece. Include this. I'll make this guy a different material. I'll make him the same as the screws, just for some basic variation. And then let's get our default brush back to stamp that guy with. And then just go back and mess with these values again. There's definitely an argument to be made that there's an easier way to do all this, and that's by just having the smart masks and smart materials sort of more adjusted to how we're painting this out to be. But to that I would say we're going to be going over it with custom painting regardless. We don't want to leave that up to the masks to sort of figure out, so I don't mind doing it this way. So a lot of these parts are so small, it really is impossible to get a ton of detail in here. So at this point, all I'm trying to do is get variation. So in this, it's just like get some height variation, get some color variation, roughness variation. And this is clearly way too much rust. Can pull a lot of that back, only to introduce some more of it in some of these tighter areas. But one of the things I'm noticing is there's definitely an abundance of green here. I could definitely afford to sort of tone that down a bit. Okay. Not bad. We do have this bolt here. Once again, hyper minor detail, but we are trying to do something to the top of our abilities here, so might as well get that final little detail on this piece. Okay. I'm just noticing like minor scratches in here, and I'm really liking it. I think I might want to introduce a bit more of that actually. I'm going to go back down to the base metal, add a fill layer. We're going to call this scratch and roughness. We can go ahead and add a black mask, add a fill to this, and we're just going to get some kind of variation by sort of supplying a grunge that will give us some sort of scratchy roughness or some kind of variation. I think we're missing that from the base metal itself. So let's just kind of find one that gives us a nice directional scratchiness. This might be what we're looking for. Maybe if we turn the scaling way up. Like, I think this looks pretty nice. Might want to tile it a little bit more. Stuff like that seems pretty cool. I might want to invert it though, so we're just getting something like this. Like, I want this to be subtle, right? Turn the balance down a little bit. And then with the scratches, what we're going to be doing is we want it to be metal. We want it to affect the height a little bit, going in -0.005, something small. Turn the roughness up. Want the scratches, of course, to be light. And we're going to want to tone it down a little bit. I guess I kind of like the look of more scratches, but I guess we would then tone the color down, and then maybe even the height is a little too much. Give it a slightly green tint. Turn the roughness down. Yeah, that looks pretty bad from some angles. Is it the metal that's doing it? Yeah, okay, it's the metal that's doing it. So I want it to be a bit rougher. Yeah, like stuff like that's coming out kind of nice. Same with there. I'm not getting it on too many of these smaller pieces, and even if we do, especially the poles, it's kind of hard to notice. Getting some there, but very subtle. Yeah, I'll say I'm a fan of that. Let's see. yeah, let's continue to add this to things. Not a ton left to add it to. Oh, we forgot about one part here. But yeah, we can go ahead and add it to this guy here. Ah, you're right. This one's going to be a little tedious to do because we decided to make all these pieces different UV shells. So I'm trying to think if I could just do this. Select through the middle. Then deselect this guy. And then there shouldn't be any collateral here. Yeah, it should be good. We can go ahead and clean this guy up. Once again, kind of difficult from the angle, but it also means that if we're not 100% accurate, it's not really the easiest thing to point out, right? Let's get our mold brush. Sort of blend this guy out as best as we can. Once again, I'm not just sort of using polygon fill for this because I kind of like how the mold brush has me sort of miss some areas and leave some accidental rust residue in some places. Okay. Just doing what I can to paint this out. We are getting quite a crazy amount of polka dots on here. Can certainly afford to paint a decent amount of these guys out. And then same with dirt. Definitely a lot of dirt back here. This side also gets quite a bit. In this case, what I'm going to do is actually, since I don't want to accidentally sort of nick some of these other areas, I am going to nuke this area for rust. And then just sort of manually paint some of it back in. Just a bit for color variation. And get rid of some of these bumps. As well as some dirt. Just want some areas to feel like they're not affected. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here is we're going to apply our screw material, and then kind of like what we did with a lot of the modeling, I think since we're hitting a very repetitive stage, what I might do is go ahead and record this, but speed it up. Just because I'm not going over any new techniques. This is just more and more of the same thing. So we have a couple areas that are also including these materials. So I think for some of the plastic materials and some of these materials, I might just go ahead and record that and yeah, essentially just speed it up. But interesting. Were these not masked out before? Could have sworn they were. But yeah, I don't want to leave you guys hanging where I'm not showing you what I'm doing before I set off on that path. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix this. I don't know when exactly this happened. Okay, let's go ahead and put our screw material in place, and then from there I will go ahead and yeah, switch over to the sort of fast mode. But let's save first, and then we'll pick up in just a second with the screws. Alright, so to get the screws, what I'm going to do is actually dive back into our frame layer. And we already had some screws set up, so we can keep it consistent and just copy those guys over, make some minimal adjustments, and kind of use it as a pretty strong foundation. And it's also going to be nice because it'll sort of ground our entire model a little bit more to sort of have the same screws across all these different texture sets. So yeah, it's going to give it the same sort of weathered effect across the board pretty much, which is exactly what we're going for. It's going to sell that all these screws are made of the same material essentially. So let's take a look at our frame. Let's scroll down, or probably close this first. Rubber screws. It should just be this guy here. So I want to copy these layers. It's also a rare opportunity where we get to see it all sort of coming together. We will have a part eventually where we sort of adjust all the colors to match. I think I mentioned that in the last one, but it's almost there. I just feel like it's a little off with the tones for my personal taste. So let's get off of frame, get back to the inside layer. Can minimize plastic. Let this do its thing where it loads, and we can add in a layer of screws. Just going to paste that guy in there. And of course, it's going to try to apply to everything, so just going to not touch anything. And yeah, so kind of a cool look, but this obviously isn't what we're going for. I'm going to add a black mask to this guy, and we're just going to be stamping in where we want it. But one important thing to note is I'm going to keep the screw layer at the bottom at all times. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when I fill in these guys, I want this height information to be kind of like the base foundation of everything. And if it overflows a little bit into our other material, since it's not super precise, it doesn't matter too much. So keeping our grayscale at 1, trying to go a little bit over so that we don't have any missed space. We can stamp that guy in. See, like I can paint around it, and it is affecting the height a little bit behind it, but not to the point where it's super noticeable. If we had it on top, of course, it wouldn't be as exact. I am loving the color variation. We're going to have to adjust it a bit, but we're getting a similar look here, which is really nice. Let's just sort of go in and stamp. And then the idea with this is sort of as we go along, and each new piece has some screws in it, we can stamp them out and immediately stamp these in so we don't forget. So this is kind of the only stage where we run the risk of kind of forgetting. But when we're done texturing this, if we have an area that's completely white, it should stick out like a sore thumb, right? Okay, we got some of these areas here. One and 2. Larger area. This definitely isn't the most screw-like object, but I think it was a good opportunity to have some sort of color variation. Stamp that guy there. Stamp that there, and you can see it's really coming together when we start sort of mixing the stuff. All the minor things really add up. You get some really nice variation. I'm just going to do a polygon fill on these guys. And let's see what else we need to add. I believe these guys have screws. Yep. It honestly just looks like a rust spot since it's such a small detail, but hey, might as well include it. One and two, and if I'm not mistaken, yep, it's tiling. Right, some stuff on this side. Pretty large. And I think them, oh no, we have the bottom pieces. But I think these are the last guys. Super subtle, but as I've been saying kind of this whole time, it's like when people notice these tiny, tiny details, they kind of sell it all the much more, right? Nice. Okay, so all I would really have to do here is adjust some of the screw levels, and then we might even want to sort of adjust them on a piece-by-piece basis. But kind of looking at the reference, they are relatively dark. So color variation is doing its job pretty well. AO dirt is nice. If anything, it's just a little bit too harsh. Might want to turn the contrast down a bit. That might be a grunge thing at that point. Yeah, it's definitely a grunge thing. Turn up AO. I still like the distinction of sort of two colors, one being sort of dirty, one being a rust. I think that looks really nice beside each other. And yeah, like I said, we can always go into these paint layers and adjust them on a case-by-case basis. Like, I think that looks really nice, but with this guy, I might want to straight up do something a bit more like that. I think that's a little extreme, but good to get some variation in there. But I think I'll leave it at that for this part. Unless I'm missing, I feel like I'm missing a screw somewhere. Nothing back there. No, you know, honestly, we might be good. So let's see. About an hour. The thing is, like I said, I've kind of gone over everything I can for this part, so I think I'm going to leave it at that. The next part will be a sped up version where I'm just working within the bolt, the plastic, and the metal aged, and just sort of applying them and messing with the masks. So no new techniques, exactly what we went over in this part. And I'll have a little commentary at the start just in case there was something that I changed, but it should be the exact same. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this part. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned something. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next part where we do a bit of a speed up. So see you then. Peace.